I welcome back to the next installment, the next video snippet of the President and the Cockroach video novel. This is politics, this is satire, this is the truth, cause, like I say with a lot of my books, you can't make this stuff up. There you go. So we're going to read the first part of the second chapter of The President and the Cockroach. And if you're all ready, we can begin. This chapter is entitled The Plenipotentiary. The press and the vids couldn't expect to be treated to an appearance by the president every day. Maybe once a week. The little white man would wave to them while boarding the presidential helicopter, or smirk in their general direction after attending a thoroughly investigated Washington, D.C. church, or flip them the bird standing in the middle window of the Oval Office facing south toward anyone standing at the curve of the fence that bordered President's Park on E Street Northwest. The press and the vids appreciated simply being noticed. The majority of Americans expected President Beans to clean house after the former president had skedaddled, but somehow the same hundreds of functionaries and staff that had been hired for the previous administration were still in place nearly 2 years later. President Beans seemed content to work with the men and women. Yes, there was one woman who had been chosen to steer the executive branch of the government through the stormy seas of state. This was unnervingly true of the president's spokesman, Scott Arskog. Scott was about 5'4", with a rounded face, wide-set eyes with droopy eyelids, a small nose, a pronounced widow's peak. He slicked his dark hair back with a daily handful of lay-right super-hold pomade, intending to look like Gary Cooper, but instead resembling the previous president's half-wit son, and a short neck. He had small, broad hands and feet, size 6 EE, and short, stubby fingers. There was no proof other than repeated rumor from some truly skanky but otherwise reliable news whores that Scott's testicles had failed to descend and were sappily hiding somewhere in his abdomen. He was not one of the best presidential spokespersons in the history of the position. He paid little attention to detail and made careless mistakes about the information he grudgingly shared with the press. He often lost his place in his prepared remarks and had on more than one occasion had difficulty organizing his notes, losing his place in the briefing schedule and even on the page he was reading. Once the press discovered how easily distractible Scott was, there was never a presser without a random clap, or two, or three, of hands that prompted Scott's eyes to search for the sound and, in doing so, lose his train of thought. After the president had introduced Ms. Levy and the two had left the presser to return to the wheelhouse of the ship of state, Scott Arskog, presidential spokesman, took the podium for a non-presidential presser. Scott was dutifully answering questions in his normal, brilliantly bewildering and obfuscatory manner when one of the reporters, probably a CCNC or another of the minor outlets, turned to the man sitting next to her and asked, "Did you see that?" "See what, Sarah?" he asked. "It was probably just my imagination, Rosie, but watch Scott's mouth." Sarah Osoli told him and went back to looking over her notes, hoping that she would be called upon. After a minute of memorizing her potential question to Scott, Sarah looked up again. She could have sworn that she saw something fly out of Scott's mouth and fly away. "Oh my God, what is that?" Sarah whispered, putting her hand up to her now open mouth. Roscoe turned to her and saw a mix of horror and disgust in her eyes. "Look," she whispered, nodding in the direction of the president's spokesman. "Huh? I was right. There's definitely something there," she whispered. "Wait a minute, maybe it'll happen again." Scott Arskog continued to explain the president's new economic initiative. "So you see, our national economic ecosystems rely on new innovations and crucial conversation between stakeholders to truly thrive in the modern climate. Moving forward," he brought his hand to his mouth, ostensibly to stifle a cough, and Sarah whispered to Roscoe, "There it is again. Did you see it?" And as Roscoe looked more closely at Scott Arskog, he saw a little black fly soar out of Scott's spokesmouth and fly across the room toward a conveniently open window. Ugh. Sarah had seen it too and almost spat out her sickened sigh. "Look, there's another one." And then another little fly coursed out of Scott Arskog's mouth. Scott realized now that some of the journalists had seen the little insects escaping from between his lips, and he skillfully brought the daily briefing to an end. "That will be all for today. The president will be signing 3 new executive orders tomorrow morning, and we will hold tomorrow's briefing at 3 p.m. to take a few of your questions on his new initiatives. Thank you." And as he walked off the little stage and back through the doors that took him into the West Wing and back to the redoubt of the new president, Sarah Asoli and Roscoe Murrow packed up their tablets and notepads and digital recorders, getting ready to return to their offices to file their stories of the presser. "I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, Rosie," she told her friend. "Yeah," Roscoe agreed, "but no one else will believe it. No video, no story. At least not yet." Sarah turned to him. "What have you got in mind, Rosie, you sneaky little shit?" "Scott has a briefing every day," Roscoe reminded her. "I'll get one of the station's camcorders, one of the Z150s. Those suckers are HD to 120 FPS and have 48x digital zoom. I'll bet that I can capture whatever comes flying out of Scott's mouth tomorrow. If not, then I'll get the next one. That could earn me a Sigma Delta Chi and a big raise. Hey, Rosie, I'll do the research on where those things are coming from. You know, the NIH or CDC or maybe the AAAS. You'll need a partner. You know that I'm better at the legwork and editing than you are. How about it? Partners?" she offered. Roscoe reached out to shake Sarah's hand. "Sure, Sarah. Partners." Flying insects. Sarah Asoli got off work, grabbed a medium burrito from the cart on K Street, rice, beans, cheese, guac, hot sauce, and washed it down with a bottle of creamy mango soda, and then walked to the metro. According to the posted schedule on the wall of the station, it should take 39 minutes to travel on the metro from Farragut North to Shady Grove, in almost Gaithersburg, but it always seemed to take Sarah an hour or more. Once she left the end of the line station, it was a 15-minute walk past the creepily named Kiss and Ride lot, down Somerville Drive to the little one-room apartment she rented with Julie the stewardess on the second floor over Empyrean Inc. The rent was right, and it was right next door to Sands, a three-table Salvadoran hole-in-the-wall restaurant with cheap and filling tamales, empanadas, pupusas, and plátanos fritos. You could get a bottle of Suprema if you like beer, cola champagne if you wanted soda, or a to-go cup of borracha or atol de elote. The man behind the counter, Barboso, after she had become a Sands regular by eating 3 or 4 meals a week at Sands over the past 2 years, he had told Sarah that she could just call him Bob. Provided excellent, fast, friendly service unless you were stupid enough to call his food Mexican, in which case he would cut you. He was tall, built like a barrel, and covered in tattoos, none of which, strangely enough, were letters or numbers. Sarah walked past Sands and waved at Bob through the front window of the restaurant. Bob smiled and waved back. Sarah unlocked the little green door just before the entrance to the tattoo parlor, flipped on the light switch, closed the door and locked it, and went up the stairs. The round fishbowl with the peace lily growing out of the top was still there on the little table in the part of the room that Sarah thought of as the kitchen, and the betta was swimming through its roots above the rainbow of rounded glass pebbles Sarah had strewn across the bottom of the bowl. Sarah set down her purse and laptop case and spooned a couple of fish food pellets into the mouth of the funnel that she had stuck in the lid that sat on the rim of the fishbowl that supported the lily. "Hi, Mwai," she said. Mwai was an iridescent turquoise and orange bicolor. His slow swimming through the roots of the peace lily in the bowl was peaceful and soothing, and he was awfully pretty and easy to take care of. She didn't have to change his water until Friday night. That had been Sarah's in-joke comment on her social life when she had bought Mwai. The water changing had never caused any interruption in Sarah's social schedule, and the only other care that the fish ever needed was a couple of betta pellets in the morning and at night. Sarah shook off her shoes, slid the belt out of the loops of her skirt, and untucked her blouse. She walked over to the refrigerator and pulled out the bottle of OJ and another of ginger ale. She put them on the counter and reached up into the cupboard, grabbing a plastic tumbler. She tossed in a couple of ice cubes and then filled the rest of the glass up, half with OJ and half with ginger ale. Sarah took a sip. Perfect. She set the glass back onto the counter and changed out of her work clothes into a pair of navy Yukon Huskies shorts and a gray oversized organic Pima cotton t-shirt. Then she flopped onto her futon with her laptop and went back to work, searching the internet for flies that came out of people's mouths. Sarah decided to investigate science before faith. Where did flies come from? Maggots. Flies laid eggs, eggs hatched into maggots, and maggots turned into flies. The circle of life. Not exactly Disney, but a circle nonetheless. But flies and their little maggot children lived in the dead and decaying part of town where there was rot, decomposition, and putrefaction, and not in the mouths of political appointees. Sarah laughed out loud when this thought through her mind. She had strongly held opinions about certain politicians, their minions, and the real interview process which led to these appointments. But she found out there is something called parasitic infestation by maggots. The scientific term for this was ophthalmomyiasis. Some of those species of flies lay their eggs in open wounds or mucous membranes. Ick, she said, only half to herself. While others, especially botflies and screw flies, hey, she thought, that Narnia guy, C.S. Lewis, wrote a book about a demon named Screwtape. A connection? Can place their eggs under a person's skin without a wound or an orifice. Ew! Other flies get into human bodies through noses or ears, or if the flies deposit their eggs on a person's lips or food, there you go. Flies in your eyes is called ophthalmomyiasis. Flies up your nose is nasal myiasis. Flies in your mouth or in your other holes is pseudomyiasis. This was too much information, Sarah decided. But maybe Scott Arskog's flies were something else entirely.